protected, never touched. Your father worked out somewhere in that car that the only version of the night where you lived was the one where he didn't. So he chose it. He told me to drive. Nico's voice thinned. He said he stopped. Empire of Ashes. Episode 16. What Aldo Said. Written by Mia. Lena. I sat across from the man who killed my father, and I did the hardest arithmetic of my life, deciding whether to have him killed. I could have. That's the thing about this city I'd learned in 11 weeks. Anyone can have anyone killed. It's only ever a question of what you're willing to spend and to become. Dario would have done it if I'd asked. I saw it in him. The terrible willingness. The man who told me he'd burn the empire for me now sitting in the wreckage deciding he'd burn the only father he had left, too, if his wife required it. All I had to do was say the word, and the man who drove my father to the harbor would follow him into it by morning, and the books would call it balanced. I wanted to. I want to be honest about the size of the wanting because everything I did next only means something if you know what I turned down. 3 years of grief has a shape, and the shape was exactly this. Nico in the water, me on the dock, finally even. And then I heard my father's voice, the real one from the deal book. Not for money, only for Elle. And I understood that the dock was the trap. The last and best one Greco ever set for me. Because the moment I had Nico killed, I became the thing my father died keeping me from. A Russo with a body count, settling the city's accounts in the city's only currency. Greco wouldn't even mourn the asset. He'd trade one old leash for the pleasure of watching Aldo Russo's daughter finally become what he'd always known she could be. The harbor doesn't avenge my father. It just lets Greco finish his work on me. I'd watched Dario nearly become his own father in real time 3 nights ago, deciding whether to remove me as a problem the way Salvatore removed problems. I'd watched him stop, and I understood now that I was standing at the exact place he had stood, the lip of becoming the thing that made me. The only inheritance worth anything in this whole rotten city is the ability to stand there and not step off. My father left me a ledger and a gift and a careful mind. But the realest thing he ever left me was the example of a man who had every reason and every means to become a monster and chose, even broke, even dying in a car 2 streets from the water, to be an accountant instead. I was not going to spend that inheritance on a body in the harbor. I'd spend it the way he spent his. Carefully. On the protection of the living. In the only currency that doesn't turn you into Greco to hold it. Tell me how he died, I said. Not that he died. How? All of it. You owe me the whole night, and then I'll decide what you are. And Nico told me. Flat, the way you tell the thing you've rehearsed in the dark 10,000 times. Greco called on a leash. A careful job. A man Aldo trusted. A car. Nico was to drive my father to a quiet place and make the water look like it took him on its own. I picked him up at the office, Nico said. He had a bag packed. He knew Lena. Your father was the smartest man I ever drove anywhere, and he got into that car knowing exactly what the car was. He talked to me the whole drive, your father. Calm. Like we were going to a meeting, which, to him, I suppose we were. The last one. The one he decided to walk into the way he walked into all of them, with the columns already added. He asked after my mother, who he'd met twice. He told me a joke about an auditor. I still can't hear it without wanting to put my own car in the water. Nico's hands stayed flat. And the thing I could never make sense of, for 3 years, the thing that kept me up was that he wasn't afraid. I've driven a lot of men to a lot of quiet places, Lena, God forgive me. They are always afraid. Everyone. It's the only honest thing left in a man at the end. Your father wasn't. He looked at me. I understand it now, because I've watched his daughter not be afraid at a dinner table that wanted her dead. He wasn't afraid because he wasn't losing. He'd already won the only thing he was playing for. He was just waiting for the car to catch up to a decision he'd made hours before he ever got in it. His hands lay flat and still on the table. I gave him the out. Believe me or don't. 2 streets from the water, I told him, I've got a cousin runs boats out of the North Harbor. I can put you on one tonight. You're in another country by Sunday. I'll tell Greco you ran, and I'll take the beating for losing you. I offered. I meant it. I'd have taken that beating gladly. And he said no, I said, because I knew my father. He said no. Something moved in Nico's gray face, the first thing that wasn't flat. He said if he ran, Greco would know the deal was off, and the deal was the only thing keeping you safe. He'd come to hand Greco the evidence in exchange for one promise, that Aldo Russo's daughter was off the board forever. Out of it. Protected. Never touched. Your father worked out somewhere in that car that the only version of the night where you lived was the one where he didn't. So he chose it. He told me to drive. Nico's voice thinned. He said.
He stopped.
Say it, I said.
My voice was not my own.
He said, she'll come for this someday. She's too much mine not to. And when she does, and she'll be cleverer than all of you, she'll get further than I ever did. You make sure she's still a person when she reaches the end of it. Don't let my girl become this. That's the price of my getting in the car quiet. You watch her. You keep her human. However long it takes. Nico's eyes were wet, and he didn't wipe them. I've kept that promise 3 years. The only way a man owned by Greco can keep anything. I stayed in the house. I watched you marry in. I watched you start turning into something the city was going to eat, and I fed Greco the minimum to keep you breathing long enough to maybe someday get to choose not to be eaten. I've been the worst guardian angel in the history of this city, but I made your father a promise in a car 2 streets from the water. I have not broken it, and I'm not going to break it tonight by letting you put me in the harbor and become the very thing he died to spare you.
Dario.
I had a gun in my hand under the table. I'd had it there since how did he die? Because whatever Lena decided, I'd already decided this. The man who raised me did not also get to be the man who broke her. If that story put one more crack in my wife than she could carry, I was going to end the story myself and grieve them both after. I didn't have to. That's the thing about Lena I keep underestimating. Even now, even married to it, I was braced for her to shatter or to harden. The 2 things grief does to a person in this city, the only 2 I'd ever seen. She did neither. She did the 3rd thing. The thing nobody in my family ever learned, the thing her father raised her to do, and then spent his whole life terrified she'd lose. She let it hurt her without letting it change her. I watched Lena Russo absorb the exact mechanics of her father's murder, and the news that his killer had been passing her the salt for 3 years, and the last words the man she loved most in the world ever said, and come out the other side still herself.
Cracked.
Not broken. The cracks were the proof she was still a person, and not yet a weapon. Her father would have wept to see it. I put the gun away. Quietly. She heard it anyway. She hears everything. Her hand found my knee under the table, the choreography Sophia had drilled into us. Except there was no audience now, and it wasn't choreography. It was a wife telling her husband, not tonight, not him, put it away. And I have never in my life been so grateful to be overruled. Lena. I'm not going to kill you, I told Nico. And I want to be clear that it isn't mercy. You don't get mercy. Not from me. Not ever. Not for the rest of whatever this is. It's that my father gave you a job in that car, and you've done it badly for 3 years, and I'm going to give you the chance to finally do it right. I leaned in. You've spent 20 years being Greco's window into this house. Good. Stay his window. But starting tonight, you show him only what we paint on the glass. You're going to feed Vittorio Greco the exact picture that gets him killed, that the Marchettis are beaten, that I folded, that we'll walk into that sit-down with our heads down and take his deal. You're going to make the most dangerous man in the city feel safe, the way you've made him feel safe for 20 years. Right up until Falcone's wolves are at his throat, and it's far too late for safe. I held his wet gray eyes. You helped one careful accountant get into a car he knew would kill him because he decided it was the only way to protect his daughter. Now you're going to help his daughter run that same arithmetic in reverse. You finish his job first. You keep me human by helping me win this without becoming Greco to do it. Then you can drive into your own harbor or out of this city forever, and I won't care which. But you finish what my father started in that car. That's the only version of you I'll let keep breathing. Nico looked at me a long moment, and then the man who killed my father did the thing my father must have seen in him the night he chose to get in the car. He bowed his head, the way you bow to a thing you've decided to serve. Aldo said you'd be cleverer than all of us, he said. He undersold it. Dario found my hand under the table again. This time it wasn't to stop a gun. He laced his fingers through mine and held on, and I understood the shape of what had just happened to my marriage, that it had survived the worst thing this city had left to throw at it. His father's man had killed my father. The two halves of the only family either of us had left were a murder apart, and we'd sat in a kitchen at the dark hour and not let it break us. Not let it make us into the people who break, and come out the other side still holding hands under a table. That's the marriage, I thought. Not the breakfasts. Not the opera box. Not even the bed.
This.
2 people handed the exact wound design to separate them, who chose instead to bleed on the same side of it. Greco built that wound. He'll never understand why it didn't work. Men who price everything can't read the one thing that was never for sale. There was only one problem, and Dario found it before I did, which is how I knew he'd come all the way back to me from wherever the gun had taken him. The book, he said, for Falcone. Someone has to carry Aldo's ledger across the city to Falcone tonight, before the sit-down, without Greco's people seeing it move. And Greco watches everyone.
He watches me.
He watches Lena. He watches Sophia. He's had 3 days to put eyes on every door we use. Dario turned to Nico, and I watched the understanding land in the room like a dropped glass. There's exactly one person in this house Greco won't have watching, because Greco thinks that person works for him. One man who can carry the most dangerous document in the city straight through Greco's surveillance, because Greco believes anything that man carries is already coming to him. The kitchen went very quiet. You want me, Nico said slowly, to carry Aldo Russo's ledger, the one weapon that ends Greco, out of this house, alone, tonight. It's the only way it reaches Falcone, I said. And there it was, the whole thing balanced on a knife exactly the width of one man's character. The only person who could deliver my father's book to the one ally who could save us was the same person who delivered my father to the water. If Nico was still Greco's, if the promise in the car was a lie he'd polished for 3 years, if 20 years of the leash had worn the man down to nothing but the leash, Then I was about to hand Vittorio Greco the single piece of paper that could destroy him, gift-wrapped by my own hand. And we'd all be dead by Thursday. Dario didn't argue it. That was how I knew it was the only door. Dario, who argues every door, who'd had a gun under the table over this man an hour ago, looked at the plan to hand his father's killer my father's book, and found, the way I had, that the math left nothing else standing. If you're wrong about him, he said quietly to me, not to Nico, we don't survive being wrong. You understand that. This isn't the cannery. There's no second move folded behind it. We hand him the book, and we're betting 4 lives and the whole war on a dead man's read of a man in a car 20 years ago. I know, I said. Then I'm with you. He didn't look away from me, whatever it costs. I married the arithmetic Lena. I don't get to flinch the one time it points somewhere this dark. And that, a man choosing to stand inside my worst gamble with me, instead of trying to save me out of it, is the closest thing to a wedding vow either of us ever got. I took my father's ledger out of the safe.
3 years of my life.
The last thing Aldo Russo ever made. I held it out across the kitchen to the man who'd driven him to the harbor. I made myself open my fingers, and I said the truest and most frightening thing I have ever said to another living soul. My father trusted you enough to get in the car. Let's find out if he was right. To be continued. That was episode 16 of Empire of Ashes. If this one has its hooks in you, the next episode is already waiting. Subscribe so you don't miss it. The complete book is on Amazon, and early episodes plus Dario POV bonus scenes are on my Patreon. Links are in the description.
I've Mia.
Thank you for listening.